Okay, welcome to the show that doesn't have a name yet. I am your host, Pannobhasa, also known by my secret public name of David Reynolds, and this is my venerable guest, Venerable Bhante G. Varapanno, who is in a hut or cabin in Thailand right now. So we are on opposite sides of the world, and we are speaking across a gulf of time and space because he's already in tomorrow morning and I'm still last night. So welcome, Bhante.
Thank you.
And I think what we should talk about is just the issue of Buddhism in the West has a number of unique problems in addition to just the universal human problems of mediocrity and corruption and that sort of thing. But like in the West, like in America, there's a whole new set of problems. And so I'd like to discuss the situation of Buddhism in the West and how can a person be a Buddhist in the West? Because just for starters, I think we could start with just talking about monasticism. Like Buddhism was originally a monastic order first and foremost. Like if you were a serious Buddhist, you were going to renounce the world and go and meditate under trees and that sort of thing. And I mean, you and I both know from our own personal experience that being a monk in the West is very tricky and very complicated, and sometimes it is very difficult to do it correctly because either you have to be sloppy and not very strict, or you're being a damned burden on people, or you're having to live like in an Asian temple surrounded by monks that maybe are not strict at all and are not supporting your own practice or whatever. So yeah, I was just curious as to your situation. You've said that you've attempted to live in Western monasteries in a few different countries.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's true. Yeah, ideally, the Buddha talks about seclusion, and in a lot of the discourses, it's very clear. After your meal, the monk sits down, spine erect, attention forward, breathes in, breathes out, and does that all day, and that's basically it, right?
Yeah.
And that's in a lot of discourses that he gave a lot of people. And so, the practice itself is all about seclusion, refraining, living in solitude, having very little, kind of really Spartan contentment, like just having just that kind of thing. The problem is that these days, and I guess who knows? It probably was the same back then. Land is expensive. I mean, Buddha had some, Anathapindika, the layman, who was actually quite wealthy. So, and the Buddha spent 25 rains at Savatiyam in Anathapindika's deer park, right, at Isipatane, right? So, this is kind of important too, because if you're living in the world, money is a very big thing. Life is expensive. So how do you seclude? How do you meditate 3 or 4 hours a day when you work, say 40, 50 hours a week? Then I'll do it on Saturday. But Saturday you've got house chores. You've got to do shopping, got to maintain the house, catch up with family, friends, whatever. Have some downtime too, and then okay, I'll do it Sunday. And then Sunday normally is a rest day too, because Monday you've got to go back to work. So it's very difficult to tell a layperson, well, you should be sitting for 3 or 4 hours a day, you should be chanting twice a day, you need to refrain from doing any evil in the world. So when you work and you're dealing with people all day in banal situations or work situations, and you're confronted in many, many ways, sometimes you've got to defend yourself. You've got to stand up for yourself. And that may cause you to say things you wouldn't normally say, or do actions you wouldn't normally do. So, see, that's why it's all dukkha, because you're on that kind of treadmill that you can't get off. The other issue, which I don't think will change, is that the lifestyle, like particularly in Australia and America too, I can say, because I lived in America extensively, and in Italy, it's a Monday, Friday work period, sometimes Saturday too. Some people work 7 days a week too, right? But it's not tuned to Buddhism in any way. Like, for example, here in Thailand, every 7 days or every 8 days, there's observance day. There's little observance day and large observance day, which kind of tunes into the moon phase. Waxing moon, waning moon, full waxing moon, half waning, half waxing moon. And, a lot of people take the day off on that day, go to the temple, or they stay with their family and do things like that. And generally, that's the day. If you're a Buddhist, you should take the 8 precepts for that day, not 5, right? So that's not going to happen anytime soon in any Western country, for sure.
Yeah,
right?
well,
so
in America, like in the West, even at Asian temples, sometimes, I mean, the Asian people have to work every day too, and it just,
right.
they can't just stand out in front of their house with the rice and wait for the monks to walk by, going for alms round, So a lot of the time they'll just, try and just drop the food off in the evening, and then the monks have to cook the food themselves or that sort of thing. So it's like in the West, just the whole cultural tradition, or also just like you were talking about earlier, where monks, they're supposed to live a life of Spartan simplicity, which actually is good. It makes it cheaper and less of a burden if monks really are living simply. But you reach a certain point, and like in the USA, it's just illegal. You can't just live in like a hut. There has to be like a front entrance and like an emergency exit, and there has to be like electricity and all this kind of thing. And so just even living the life of a monk is just downright illegal if you're really going to go for it.
I mean, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point, because here, like in India or Thailand, you can, a monk, like before or after the rains period, you can take off on the road and just pitch a tent that night anywhere, sleep, then you pack up in the morning and walk another 10 or 15 miles, and then pitch a tent, rest. You can go live in a cave for 20 years. No one's going to bother you. You can live in a forest or in the jungle even, and no one's going to bother you. No one's going to say, oh, you can't do this, right? So there's a lot of those issues when you buy land in America, all the rules. So you can't just buy land and build a hut and things like this in America or Australia or Italy. You need to get permission. You need to go through a whole set of rules, which is expensive, time-consuming. Sometimes if you want to build a hut, you have to wait 3 years for approval,
Yeah.
So, there's all these little things that make it difficult to just cut out and be a monk. But also, we live on Christian time. It's kind of like work Monday to Friday. You Saturday. Some people work Saturday. Sunday's your day off. You need a day off from work. You can't just be going 100 miles an hour all the darn time. You need some downtime. You need to spend time with family, friends, that like social. We're also humans. We're social. I'm talking about lay people, that is. But even monks, the Buddha didn't want us to be totally secluded without total contact with people, because he kind of said, no, that'll drive you crazy. So we have meetings and we have a social setting because that's important. So, but for lay people, it's completely difficult because the lifestyle just doesn't allow. The only way you can really do it is to make so much money to retire, and you've got millions of dollars. You buy yourself a property, and you set it up in a way that that you can live that lifestyle. But you need money to do that. You need a lot of money to do that. So some people might have to work 40 years to get to that point where they can actually retire and get into this lifestyle. But by then you're like 60 or 70 years old and your body is weak, because to do meditation you have to be strong. Yeah, to sit 10 hours straight, 12 hours straight daily is tough. It's tough. It's really hard work. People don't think it's easy, but it's hard. People think it's easy. It's actually very, very hard. But you can't be meditating and thinking about, oh, geez, I've got to pay the phone bill. Geez, I've got to pay the electricity bill. Oh, I've got to pay the council rates. Oh, I've got to pay the rubbish. Oh, I've got to do this. I've got to do that. With that all in your mind, there's no way you can just sit down and really focus and go deep into concentration unless you're very strong. But even then, that takes time to develop. Like you have to develop the fundamentals for that. There's a lot of things that have to fall into place before you can actually sit for long periods of time. It just doesn't happen like that. Well, at least not for me anyway. But the temples in Thailand, you can get lost in a temple. You just go arms around. You can stay there for 40 years and no one will bother you. That cannot happen in Australia or America or Italy. It just doesn't work that way. It's not set up that way because you can't really seclude. And then there's the issue of taxes. Like if people give a monk donations, then I have to claim taxes, things like this. So that's why we have to set up a charity for non-profit purposes to take care of the land. And when you set up a charity, it's a problem because you need a board of lay people. You need a board of people. And if they're not fully locked into the Buddhist lifestyle or understand Buddhism deeply, that creates a lot of problems. I mean, I've heard it before. There was the older stories. There was a monk in New Zealand who was in this situation, and basically the board was telling him what to do. Like he says, look, he was the abbot, but he couldn't do what he wanted to do. He had to follow the board. Now, you can't do that.
That's like the situation at the first monastery I stayed at. And could I ask you to move your camera a little so that you're closer to the center? Because like on the Skype thing, it's going to be cutting off the sides. So.
Okay. How's that?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you should try.
In my camera, I'm right in the middle. So,
okay. Yeah, right now
you are right on your right side of the frame in my camera, from what
really?
I see. You're not in the middle.
Okay. Yeah,
people are just going to have to understand we're amateurs.
Yeah. You're literally, and that's another issue I was bringing up is that like monks especially, they're not even allowed to handle money, which just makes you totally dependent on the board of directors or whoever it is that's paying the bills, or unless you're just living with monks that are paying bills and handling money, which is usually, I mean, that happens very easily because most Asian monks especially handle money. Maybe I don't know. Maybe you know better than I do, but it seemed to me like about half.
It's a taboo subject. It's a taboo subject, and I don't want to say I haven't been in every monastery. I haven't seen every monk do it. I'm sure there's some monks that do it, but it comes down to practicality. Like, see, and then comes the question: well, why put yourself in that position in the first place? So then, that's why a lot of monks, we have to retreat to Thailand. We have to stay in Thailand because there's all those temptations are not there. Like I don't have to touch money here at all. I don't even have to go near it. But you have lay people here in Thailand who are totally devoted to the temple, and they're not rich at all. But it's accepted in this. It's accepted in this society because been here for hundreds and hundreds of years, so it's merged. It's like Christianity in Western countries. We don't realize it, but it's been there for 2,000 years. It hasn't been there a day, right? So, we just kind of got used to working Monday to Friday, Saturday, take the day off Sunday, be with the family. Like that's kind of like the lifestyle. So most Buddhists, Western Buddhists that I know, they're part-time, like they'll come to the temple maybe once a month or once every 6 months or whatever. They might come and do dana, which is offering of food once a week or something. But even with COVID now for the last year and a half, they haven't been able to do that either. So a lot of monasteries, particularly in Australia, they're really struggling. The monks have to do things they shouldn't be doing to survive.
Yeah. And lay people, Western lay people, if they're going to donate, they're just inclined to just send some money. And if monks don't handle money, then you've got that problem again.
Well, but you still need a board, because otherwise the monk has to then pay taxes, has to do all those things. So you're dragging yourself back into the lay life, and you're starting to think about money. See, when say for example you got $10,000 sitting there, you got to think about it now. How am I going to spend it? What am I going to do with it? I'm going to spend it on this. So you're not cutting away from it. You're not cutting away from it, which is what a monk should be doing. You're not cutting away from these things that need to be. See, in Thailand, you don't need a non-profit to start a temple, and it's understood that the abbots they don't have to pay taxes at all. Like they don't have to do income tax assessment. It's understood they're the abbot of the monastery. They manage the money, and that's it. And donations are not the government leaves it completely alone. But that doesn't happen in Australia or America or Italy. Everything needs to be transparent on the books. Rightly so in a lot of ways. But that doesn't work in Buddhism. It's like you either trust it or you don't. But if Buddhism is practiced properly, there is no funny business going on, because there just cannot be. Because a monk would always ask one or two lay people to come and get the money. Say if the money is stored in a safe, a monk would ask, okay, call two lay people, can you take the money out? Okay, see those bills that needs to be paid. That's it. How much money is left? It all gets recorded. The monk doesn't touch it.
Even that is strictly prohibited, though. I mean, you can't even tell anybody what else to do with money. In fact, the rules about money are so strict, you're not even allowed to consent to somebody keeping money for you, which is almost impossill. I mean, it's the same Nisagi.
Maybe that's in Burmese, but in I don't know, like in the monastic code, I've gone. You're allowed. The Buddha said you're allowed to have a steward out of compassion for people who want to give money, right? So you're allowed to say, there's my steward, my attendant. If you want to give a donation, that's my attendant. You can't say, give me the money. You just say, that's my attendant. And you're allowed to have an attendant who takes care of it.
That is true.
You're allowed to do. But even then, you can't really tell the attendant every 5 minutes, hey, how much money do we have? Okay, can you go buy this? Can you go buy that? You can't really do that either. So because the idea is you cut off. That's it. That's the whole point of the discussion. But money, see, I guess in Buddha's day, it wasn't really paper money. It was gold and silver, I guess. And it was a different kind of I guess the barter system worked, and under a king in India, I guess things work differently. They work different. The way the economy worked is not like it is today. Like everything requires a transaction of money. So if you want to live in Australia, that's a really big problem to overcome. So you're going to probably break some rules from time to time, and not because you're trying to break the rules, it's because you have to survive. But
yeah, it's like almost the only way you can be a strictly practicing Theravada Buddhist is to leave Western countries and go to a Theravada Buddhist country.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
unless you're really set up, unless you've got a group of Thai people. Or Asian people who have made enough money at home, they've paid off their house, they've got enough money in the bank, and they understand how it all works, and they understand the intricacies and the subtleties of money and what with monks and things like this, and they're ready and willing to help the temple grow. And that's how basically they grow, like that. Westerners, just in general, there's very few Western Buddhists that I know, very few. And out of the Western Buddhists that I know, there's even fewer that have disposable income, like money in the bank kind of thing, where they can give, certain amount of donation every month, let alone, buy properties and things like this. It's usually Asian people who do it. But that's because the Buddhism is at core is the core is their faith, is what they believe in. So when you've got most Westerners start off somewhere else, maybe it's changing, but most Westerners start off either in Christianity or Judaism, or not many. I don't think many in Muslims. I haven't really seen that yet, but generally, or atheism, or they're in Hindu, but generally it's Christian, or like a kind of, maybe your parents are third generation Christians. They're not hardcore. They don't go to church every week. They're not really interested, but you call yourself a Christian because you just call yourself a Christian. That kind of thing, but you're not really practicing or paying attention. So you come from that base, and you come from that work ethic too, right? So there's nothing ingrained in you about continuous generosity, because the Sangha depends on continuous generosity. It's not like you give $20 and, okay, I'll see you next year. No, it requires people.
Unless you got a whole bunch of people doing that on different days.
Well, yeah. That's what. In that case, you need millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people. We're talking about $20. Yeah. So I don't see how it's ever going to grow. And then you've also got forces that don't want it to grow.
Yeah, well, most people that are calling themselves West or Buddhist in the West, they're either Asian immigrants or else they're just cultural Marxists with a little Buddhist flavoring at it. So, I want to get to the strict, traditionalist, more or less orthodox Buddhists, like the ones that just accept what the texts say and try to follow that as well as they can, then you're already down to like 2% of 2%, maybe 2% of the whole country say 1% of the entire country considers themselves to be Buddhist. And then maybe 1 or 2% of those are really trying to follow an established orthodox tradition, instead of just going and listening to more about global warming and Black Lives Matter and that sort of thing than about the Buddha. So it's like, we're so scattered and so sparse that, trying to set up any kind of community, like geographically, just people actually face to face with each other, it's very rare, because it's rare to have more than just a small handful of people in any big city, and in small towns it might be zero. So,
well, that's another thing I just thought of. It's like Westerners like their privacy too. Living in a community, a lot of Westerners have a hard time with that, being around people 7 days a week. There's no break from it. Like in a temple, you seclude, but you have, in the morning, for example, you always got to see people, or when we have meetings or group chanting. So you don't have days off. That's another thing in Buddhism. There's no days off. It's not, you don't take a day off from practice or from chores or from work or from striving. But the other thing is the privacy thing. It's like, a lot of Westerners, they like to have their home, their privacy, do their own private little things. There's sex, a lot of Westerners like to have, not just Westerners, Asians are, there's more than 1 billion people in China and India. We can't say they don't know about it, that they don't like it. Of course they do. But
what's a sec?
Sex is a big, pardon?
What's a sec? What are those?
No, sex.
What are they?
No, sex, S-E-X.
Oh.
You know that thing the villagers do?
Yeah. Oh, I see. I get it.
That thing that drives everybody bonkers. Well, that's a big part of lay life. Entertainment is a big part of Western life. Like,
Yeah.
you just can't deny it. It's like, you're brought up watching movies, watching sports, sexual relations are a big part. Now, when you I'm talking in the context of Buddhism, when you say, abstain from it. Don't watch movies. Don't watch the football. Don't watch the boxing. Cut away. Throw your TV away. Just do your focus on your chanting. Focus on your breath. Have 24-hour mental attention. Like what? So most Westerners do it kind of like a little bit. So what is popular in the West is these Vipassana workshops where you go for 10 days, and then the rest of the year you do nothing. You could just go back on with your life. So what's popular is retreat. So for 2 or 3 days you go hard at it, and then you come back to normality. You switch the phone back on, you switch everything back on, you go back to your partner, etc., etc. So these things are just part of I'm not saying they're bad or good. It's not a judgment or a moral judgment. I'm just saying they're just how it is in Western life. Like sexuality. Yeah. Sex is just a big part of life, and so is entertainment. And Buddhism, we're talking about abstination. So people don't abstaining from it completely. So people, it's not very attractive. It's not attractive at all. You want to take
that sort of thing isn't attractive to anybody, or just very, very few. I mean, it's the same way in ancient India in the Buddhist time. I mean, it's just a very few that are actually going to renounce the world. So, I mean, just doing retreats, I mean, if that's the best people can do, then it's better than nothing. But getting back to the community thing.
That's probably how it's going to stay,
Yeah.
That's probably going to happen.
Getting back to the community thing, though, it's like, what I had in mind is that there are a lot of you can call them conservative Western Buddhists who really do want some kind of community. They want like group support. They don't want to be living at a temple all the time, but at least they want to have a Dharma hall down the road that they can go to, like a church, and meet with other people and hear a Dhamma talk. They don't have to just see one on YouTube, and that sort of thing. And it's yeah, a lot of people, well, several people anyway, have been asking me about this. Yeah.
You went from a lot to several real quick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, that's almost like an exaggeration of how many Western Buddhists there are that are like conservative, traditionalist Western Buddhists.
Because to me and you, 10 people is a lot.
Yeah. Pretty much. So that's
really
kind of an issue also.
But let's look
at
that.
Your only chance at being an Orthodox traditional Buddhist is just to go to Asia and do it there.
And even here it's tough. Like even here it's changing because you've got a huge influence because a lot of the young people study at university in Australia, the UK, or America. So they're in these countries for 4 or 5 years to get their degrees or master's degrees, so they pick up a lot. So they tend to stray away from the traditions, and they go back to Thailand and they start doing things that they start bringing the Western world into Thailand, and this has been a big flux, especially in the last 10, 15 years. Now, obviously, with COVID, this has slowed down, but you can't help these forces. The forces of delusion, greed, hatred, lust. These are strong forces, and in Buddhism, we go into them. We really take them on. We're trying to actually get rid of them in a lot of ways, you could say. But coming back to the church thing, see, this is another thing that really irks a lot of people is money and donations. So, for example, right, a church, to build the church, every Christian that goes to that church, usually the rule is you give at least 10 or 15% of your weekly earnings to the church, right? That's usually the rule. It's like that in Judaism too, I think. You're supposed to give a certain amount to the synagogue.
Called tithing.
Yeah, right. Okay, so in Buddhism, it's what's different. I mean, a temple, it's the same. Like people expect that a Buddhist temple runs for free. For some reason, there's this association, Buddhism, free, right? No, the Dharma is free. The teaching is absolutely free. Like I'll talk to you for 5 hours and I'm not going to charge you 1 cent, right?
Yeah.
But the physical locality is never free. And,
well, I don't know. When I was living in Burma, I mean, there's places you live in a cave in Burma out in the woods, and that's pretty much free.
No, but that, like we've already established, though, you cannot do that in America or Australia or Italy. You cannot
in the
live
West, it's a non-starter.
You just it's moot. You can't do that. So the only thing you can do in the West is you need to buy what a lot of monks have done already is you buy a little house and you live in a house and you build like a little dharmasala in the backyard. Okay,
Yeah.
like my temple in Sydney, it used to be a garage. So there's the house at the front, and at the back there was like the old garage, and that got transformed into a sala, and that's the temple, right?
Yeah. I was living in the congregation hall in back of a house in the suburbs in Fremont, California, until I went to Burma, and when I came back, it had been torn down because they had built it without getting the permits and all that sort of thing.
That happens a lot. That happens a lot.
They learned in Burma, if you want to get anything done, you have to just avoid the government. You don't tell the government anything. Yes, and so they try that in America, and the government's a little less incompetent in America than in Burma. So then they have to tear down what they built.
In Thailand, if the king gives you the land, because the king has given a lot of land to monasteries, previous kings and stuff. If the king gives you the land, you do whatever you want. The government can't touch you.
Yeah.
The monks can build whatever structures they want, and the government can't say a darn thing, right? And so, but it's kind of generally known that monks aren't going to build, 5-story buildings and all. We build huts. The only really big structures we build are the salas. But generally, when you build salas, you have lay people, contractors coming in because it's a big job. So you need a lot of
pagoda.
Pardon?
Plus maybe a pagoda, or at least that's what they do in Burma.
Yeah. So they're kind of like the biggest structures that were built, but they don't house people all the time. They're just empty. Like they're just a floor with columns. So there's the roof generally is very, very light. It's not a heavy roof. It doesn't snow here. Well, not in this region anyway. So you don't have to build it with a certain kind of, it doesn't have to be really rock solid. And it's just the floor. And so there is still a bit of engineering that needs to be done, but that's pretty much it. Because like this hut that I'm staying in, it's just a hut. It only needs 10 people are not going to come and live in here. So the floors doesn't have to be built so sturdy, so it can be built pretty quickly too. And that's understood.
Either. No inspector. I said no building codes and no inspectors either.
Right. And also another, with that, it's like this: you have to have fire safety, OH&S. You have to have disability access. You have to have, like I had to help my temple in Sydney do all of this. It costs us thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to get fire safety approval. You have to buy extinguishers. There's so many things you got to do just to keep the doors open. It's thousands and thousands of dollars. The collection of rubbish in Sydney, for example, that costs like $800 a month just for them to come and collect our rubbish. So you've got that bill.
Sounds like a lot of rubbish.
It's not. It's just 4 bins. It's 4 bins a week. That's $800 a month in Sydney. Sydney is very expensive, right? It's one of the most expensive cities around. So everything costs money. So your local church that's on the corner there, whatever local church or whatever Freemason lodge or whatever synagogue or whatever mosque, it requires thousands of dollars a year to keep it open. Thousands. There's a temple that I know about, and I found out how much it costs, and it was really not a big temple. It costs about $3,600 a month in expenses, because this is the thing. You cannot open, well, strictly, you cannot open a temple in a private zone, like in a residential zone, right? The only way you can open a temple, it has to be a commercial zone. Now, a commercial zone, it's commercial rates for everything across the board. Why commercial? Because if you've got groups of people coming in, you need parking, you need to have all the facilities. And in a domestic situation, like if you're living in a suburb, you can't open up a temple there. Well, you could, but only 2 or 3 people could come to your house every day. You can't really have 100 people coming in because it's Maga, Puja, or Wesak Day, and 100 people coming in, bang bang, cooking and doing it and making all and chanting and having the speakers on and all that kind of stuff. You can't do that in a house. So that's the other big problem, is that the only properties you can buy are ones that are commercially zoned, rural commercial zone. Even if it's rural zones, you can't really do it, because if you have groups coming in, you have to have insurance, and that's another cost, right? That's another huge cost. Insurance, you need insurance, safety insurance, accident insurance, all that kind of stuff. Then there's, so that's a big thing. So like I was saying to some lay people the other day, like your church costs a lot of money to run every week. The property, okay, so say that you've got a church on the corner, someone had to buy that property at some point. Someone had to fork out the money to buy the property. And people had to fork out the money to sustain that church, and continuously, like every month. And a Buddhist temple is no different. It's no different, because the monks, we don't get paid. We don't get paid a salary to do all the maintenance and to take care of the place. We don't get paid.
Accept it even if they offered it.
Pardon?
You couldn't accept the payment even if they offered it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I know certain ministers get paid, right? Yeah. And they get a certain allowance if they have the family. We don't get that, right? So the question is, the temple itself, the structure itself, and the land, and there's land rates too, which cost thousands of dollars. Like if you're on a commercial property that's say 10 acres, the land rates on that are pretty high every year, into the thousands. Okay, just that. Then connecting electricity, sewer, water, everything else, because you can't even collect your own freaking water. See, in Thailand, if you've got a water source, you can collect water from there, and no one's gonna care. Also, toilet and sewage in the back of the huts here. We built, we put two pipes of cement in the ground. The sewer goes into there, and that's it. And no one says anything. But you can't do that in Australia. You have to have
in some places in America, you can't even collect rainwater.
Right.
They won't even allow you to collect rainwater.
Yeah, well, in Australia, that's the case too. So you can't really go off grid. You can in India, and if you, for example, if you live in a mountain, there's a stream, you have every right to collect the water and do what you want with it. But you can't really do that in Australia. There's a lot of rules and regulations around it. So there's so many things, like all these little practicalities that make it almost impossible to just get off the grid. So you can't get off the grid.
Bhante, I think we've made the point that just setting up Buddhism or Buddhist centers in the West the way it's done in the East just doesn't work.
It just won't work.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not absolutely impossible, and I assume there have been some who have managed it, but it's going to be just a very on the fringe sort of a thing. So I mean, what kind of advice do you give to a sincere person who believes in Theravada Buddhism and wants to practice it, but let's say they're a lay person, let's say they're already married, they've got obligations to support their family, So they can't just renounce the world and go to Southeast Asia. So what are they going to do? That is the question. I mean, I can tell you my answer, but
well,
you
go
might have
ahead, because you probably got, that maybe it'll give me food for thought and might trigger off some solution. But right now, the only thing I could say, I would say you would have to carve out a structure of discipline for yourself and stick to it. So in other words, and this goes back to the determination practice. So you say to yourself, okay, you follow the 5 precepts as the base. You try to do at least once or twice a day. You do some chanting for 10, 15 minutes. You find the spot. But every day you've got to sit. You've got to try to sit every day for an allocated amount of time. Then there's studying and everything else. So if you want to be a layperson and want to do it without the Sangha and want to do it on your own, it's possible. But you just got to be very disciplined and you just create a strong structure for yourself and stick to it. And stick to it. And then when you can, you duck it when you get a week here, or you get a few days, go on a retreat. Go on a retreat somewhere go and stay in a temple somewhere, or go to some log cabin somewhere in the forest that you can rent for a week that's cheap, and just go all out, try to go all out. That's what would be my suggestion for that. In terms of building a temple, there's only one way, and I hate to say it because I don't like to use that. There's only one way. I know. It's not that. I've suffered a lot. I've had a lot of failures in this thing. The only way you can really do it is, okay, I'm talking about America, talking about Australia, talking about Italy, because they're the 3 countries that I know, right? Not Thailand. The only way you can do it is you need to buy the property outright first, and it needs to be suitable to have a Dharma hall and good for seclusion. So you need at least 5 or 6 acres as a prerequisite, at least. And you need at least about $1 million or 2 million in the bank. Why? Because for the next 10, 15 years, you're not going to get much donation. You're not going to get, so you need something to be able to pay the maintenance and whatever else you need for the next 10, 15 years. And I say $1 million or 2 because when you come and live in Australia, you see how expensive it is. So that's the only solution I have, and there's no other way. There's no other way to do it. So you have to have money in the bank. I mean, sure, you can have 500,000 or 200,000, but if you're not going to get 100 people every week coming in giving $1,000 to the temple, or even $10, right? And the costs aren't going away. So there has to be a way to deal with that. You see, so where Christianity, for example, because it's been around for 2,000 years, and there's a lot of Christians in Western countries, they're used to it. They understand their church requires money to run, so they give money to the church. The synagogues are the same. The synagogues, Jews give a lot to their synagogues because, for example, you look at the synagogues in New York, how much would they cost every month to run in New York, for example, right? We're not kidding. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, right? So, when I say 5 acres, or, if you've got a Sangha community, it might not cost as much as that. Hang on a second. I think we're cutting out, wait.
Oh, you're doing fine. I can still hear you.
Okay. So, yeah, it's not going to cost, obviously, if you buy a temple in New York, that's going to cost a hell of a lot more than buying a temple in rural Ohio. But this is where the issue is. If you go too rural, there's no one there. No people can come. So how do you raise the money? How do you fund it?
We're already pretty much agreed that the temple route is going to be a fringe thing. You're going to have like the eccentric rich Buddhist person who just springs the money for most of it. But getting back to like the
So what's
individual.
your answer? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the individual Theravada Buddhist who just sincerely wants to practice it as well as he can. Yeah, I mean, what you said at first is really true. I mean, you have to be self-motivated. You've got to self-discipline yourself if nobody else is there. You just have to read the texts, and those are your teacher. Like the Buddha said on his deathbed, or when he's lying on the ground right before he passed into Parinibbana, it's, the Dhamma is your teacher after he's gone. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it is good to go to retreats. It's good to be like on a forum where you've got some kind of interaction with like-minded people. But for the most part, you're just kind of on your own, and you have to accept that. And I mean, in a way, that's in accordance with Buddhism. Go alone like the horn of the rhinoceros. That's how I started, just as a solitary Buddhist in the West, and learned most of my Buddhism from books. There was no YouTube in those days. And one of the most important things to me is, first of all, you'd have to, if you're a layperson, you have to put more emphasis on mindfulness than on like trying to cultivate jhana. More, you're going to be doing more vipassana than samatha, simply because if you're living a busy life with all kinds of stuff going on, then mindfulness is easier than trying to just get down to just stillness and silence. It's
Yeah,
like,
that's hard. Like I said before, like if you've got bills to pay that are coming in every week, yeah, it's very hard to put that aside in your mind. It's very hard to put. If you've got 3 kids that need to be fed every day, and they need to be taken to school, and they get sick, and it's very hard to just say, okay, I'm going to sit for 2 hours and not think about anything. I mean, if you can do that though, that's awesome. But it is difficult to do that. That is difficult to do that. Very difficult. So you're right. In sati, the sati or mental awareness is what you're talking about. Yeah, that definitely you can practice in any situation for sure.
yeah,
For sure.
like mindfulness of everyday activities. You can be mindfully driving your car to work, or mindfully going up or down the stairs, or mindfully brushing your teeth, that sort of thing. I mean, if you
Yeah.
just get into the discipline or the practice of doing that, then that's like Buddhist practice on a daily basis. But still,
Yeah,
it's
that's
one
a
thing we
good
were talking about.
foundation.
Yeah, one thing we were talking about before we turned on the recorder is, it's like lay people, they just can't afford to be saints. You just cannot keep perfect sila. That's one of the purposes of being a monk or a nun, is you can purify your sila more easily that way. But if you've got a family to take care of, then you're going to have to defend them if they're in trouble, that sort of thing. And so one advice I've had to give, like, I mean, everybody cannot be a Buddhist saint. I mean, civilization would just collapse, because you have to have like armed forces and like police with guns and this sort of thing. So if you have to acknowledge what Buddhism teaches, and then you have to be honest with yourself and say, well, I'm not following it perfectly, but you really can't deny the existence of karma, or in English karma. I mean, so I mean, even if you're going to be breaking rules, if you're going to be behaving in some way that's not entirely saintly, you just have to accept that you're making karma that's going to be coming back on you. And so one of the practices of a Buddhist layperson would be a kind of stoicism, where you're just going to have to accept harsh consequences with a certain equanimity and as much fortitude as you can manage.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And yeah, I'm not going to add anything to it. That's perfectly said. That's perfect. Yeah, exactly. So, it's just kind of like, if you want to study Buddhism properly, you have to drop everything, and that's just reality. But if you want to do it in a text, if you want to do it in a Western country and you want to have your family, so you want to have everything and then be a Buddhist as well. Well, you see, you've also got to accept that that's kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Now, I'm not judging that. I'm not saying that's morally wrong or it's incorrect or you're an idiot if you no. Not saying that, right? It's different strokes for different folks. It's kind of like it yeah, sooner or later, though, what will happen, though, if you're able to stay disciplined and have a course, what will happen, though, what I believe is you get pockets that open up, and eventually you get growth spurts, and you get some insights, and that triggers off deeper realizations, and eventually your life starts to go in that direction anyway if you just keep chipping at it. Even if you do bad karma, even if you can't be perfect every day, that kind of stuff. And it's not like you're perfect every day anyway, like even as monks. That's why, the Buddha said, especially with all the rules, there's the purification action, the purification karma, which we do before reading the rules, because every monk screws up. There's so many rules that you screw up all the darn time. It's normal. The Buddha understands this, so he set up the purification where you ask forgiveness and you move on. So that's not such a big deal. The issue is the results, what you talked about. But the other thing is not to underestimate discipline. So if you consistently strike at it every day, you do something at it every day, eventually you start to grow. And as your wisdom starts to connect with the mechanics, like you've got the mechanics of Buddhism, which is, all right, I'll sit down and do my chanting at first. I'll focus on in and out breath. All right, I'm aware of everything. Everything's mechanical at first. It's like a learned behavior, because it's a cultivation and development. So cultivation and development, it's like when you play a guitar, when you learn a guitar or you're a carpenter, at first everything's mechanical. It's just like trying to get everything, like when you're playing a guitar, for example, it's the mechanics first before the intuition comes out, before the actual expression, the creation comes out unhindered by the mechanics. The mechanics follow. So your practice is the same. So like you keep hitting at it. You keep doing it. Eventually you start to get, like it's like a guitar. You practice the chords and it all sounds really crappy. But one day, after a few months, you're able to play a tune and it just comes out and like, wow, geez, where did that come from? And then you've had a bit of an insight into something because the mechanics is starting to tune in with the intuition. Your intelligence is tuning in with the mechanics. So once you start to tap into the wisdom faculty, once that starts to come out, well, at that point, you might even be Arya. So it's worth fighting for, So discipline leads to good things. It doesn't lead to bad things. So that's one thing you can count on. So even if you're practicing by yourself, even if it's difficult, you got children or whatever, you've got a lot of things to do, but in your heart, you just really want to break free in your heart anyway. Do your duties in your heart, break free anyway, and keep the discipline going. One day that may very well happen because you're setting your mind to it. The other thing here that we lack, that I'll talk about, and then we can maybe talk about something else, is community awareness. See, Westerners, we're very big on family and taking care of the family and our relationships and putting that all first. But we're not very big on community awareness. We're not very big on taking care of our suburb, our community. Like, for example, taking care of our region. So as always, food and water, medicine, things like that. That's a big difference in a Buddhist society because we pay attention to the community. Like in a temple, in the Sangha, all the lay people, we know what they're doing. We know if they're sick. We know, so we bring, we go and visit them. We know what's going on in the community and who's sick, who's doing it tough money-wise. I've seen it happen many times. Where monks, the abbot, he'll try to pull some money if there's a person, like for example, if there's a widowed person and they can't afford the funeral, the monks will try to pull some money, not from themselves, but they might do a little bit of fundraising and then go pay for the funeral. There's also many things that monks do to build roads. We build roads or raise money to build roads in the community. Mahabua built a hospital, and now a lot of some of his students who are now senior monks in their own right, like Lompo Intaway, for example, twice a year he does fundraising for hospitals and for schools. So Buddhism is all about not just taking care of your family and your relationship, but it's also taking care of your community, your responsibility to community, giving back. That's a big thing in Buddhism that gets missed, because in Western countries, I'll say this much: in Italian culture, that's huge. It's just family, and outside of that, it's not really. You don't really, it's kind of like, you give everything to the family, but outside you give very little, right? It's like my mother and father were like that, and a lot of other Italians. It's like everything for the family, but very little for the community. And this is why Western community is not thriving, because people are not giving back to there's no community awareness. Right? That's one thing I want to add here that I think is very important.
Especially for lay people.
Pardon?
Especially for lay people. I mean, a monk, he's kept pretty much renouncing even his family. I mean, ideally, if you're doing it according to the books.
But it's strange, though, because in the Sangha, you see, there's this strange dichotomy there, I've noticed, right? Is that when you go arms around, people put food in your bowl, right? So you're secluded, but you're kind of not, because after that person's put some food in your bowl a few times, you start to develop a kind of care for that person. You're like, wow, an appreciation. So when you see that person sick, or you hear that person or people's being unwell, I naturally, will try to do something for them. I'll approach them, or I'll talk to some lay people in a temple and say, look, here's some medicine, bring it to that person. It's like an interchange, right? So you're still secluded, but the reality is you're secluded, but you're not. The seclusion happens in the mind, but physically you're not secluded, because we're dependent on each other. So even the Sangha, we give back to the community in Thailand especially. We give back to the community in many, many ways. And not just giving Dharma talks, but we do works, we do a lot of things. And I think that Thailand's booming. It's thriving. It's completely different. When I go to Australia, it's not the same. It's different. Everybody's kind of like in their own little pockets. But I think, for the sake of finishing this part anyway, community in a lay situation, a civilization, is very important. It's also how you root out evil. It's also how you push evil to the fringe. It's also how you take care of each other in severe situations. But it's also keeping the community safe. When communities know each other, when everybody knows each other and knows who comes in, who comes out, it's like a policing system without having police. And we've lacked that in Western society big time, because it's more like stay in your house, don't worry about it. It's kind of evolved that way and I believe a lot of that, because when I was growing up as a kid and no one had computers, everybody was out on the street. Everyone had bikes. Everyone was playing basketball, kicking the ball down the road, playing on the road. You're always at different houses in your neighborhood, and you got to know everybody. And it was a different kind of community. But today it's not like that. Everybody's on the computer ignoring what's happening next door. No one knows each other anymore. It's hard to even know your neighbor. So I think that's something, I just thought I'd bring that out in just, food for thought. Community awareness is just as important as family awareness. Because also your family has to walk on that street. Your kids have to walk the streets. Your kids, your friends, your loved ones have to go into the community. So a way of protecting them as well is to know what's happening in your community and who's what. So this is just something I've learned here in Thailand, and I've seen it in practice. It works very, very well.
Yeah, I think especially for lay people to participate in community is important. Although, I mean, according to the text, a monk's main contribution is he's just raising the consciousness of the world. Even if he's sitting in seclusion, he's like raising the center of consciousness of everybody, sending metta to all beings, which I assume has some benefit. And also, it just sees the field of merit. People are earning merit by by supporting him and allowing somebody to strive for enlightenment, even if they're not able to. But yeah, I would like to mention
one thing. It's what the monk doesn't do that benefits society immensely. You see, it's what the monk or the lay person doesn't do. It's refraining from doing evil. So in other words, we're not adding any evil to society. We're what we're doing is we're doing no harm.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we could finish up on, is that really it's one thing that I keep receiving questions about, and it's like a lot of people really don't get it. You know, they're asking, is this good or bad? Is this action good or bad? Or, you know, should monks or should lay people do this? But really, I mean, good or bad is in your mind. I mean, evil is a mental state. You know, it's like a gun isn't evil, a knife isn't evil, poison isn't evil. It's just the volition is evil. And so that's one thing that lay people living in the world should be careful about, is that, I mean, you can do something that isn't very saintly. You can do it with like horrible mental states, or at least you can try to have like a kind of equanimity. You know, like if you're going, like, let's say some vermin is like infesting your child, and so you kill the vermin. I mean, if you do it with like equanimity, or at least, you know, your mind is free of hatred and this sort of thing, then at least you're making less bad karma and you're introducing less badness. So it's like even like in Japan, you know, you had like the Zen Buddhist samurai who are you know, they're teaching and learning that you know, if you're going to kill, you shouldn't do it with hatred. And I'm not endorsing killing, but still there is something to the idea of just trying to maintain equanimity no matter what you're doing, just so that you're not getting lost in like the craving in one way, or like the aversion and hatred the other way. You know, if you can just maintain your mental states in a kind of equanimity, so you've got less lobha and less dosa, then that's creating less evil, even if as a layperson you really can't afford to be a saint.
Yeah, and see, being realistic, like as a monk, I have the luxury to do no evil because I can keep to myself, and you know, but see, I put myself in this situation on purpose, right? It's a conscious choice that I've made. So I have to go without a lot of other things. But for a layperson, the do no harm principle, do no harm to yourself, do no others. But life is just not like that. So that brings me, I guess, do you want to talk about it now, the difference between protection and violence?
Yeah, sure. We can wrap up with that. That's sort of like the culmination of where we've been going.
How long have we been going now? What is it, now already?
Already.
What?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I can't see the time on the... Wow. Okay, I thought we were around 40 minutes. Okay, well, nice to talk to you, Pano.
Yeah.
All right, well, maybe we can do it next time. Maybe we can do it next time.
No, let's go for it now. Where do you
want to start with
conversation anyway?
Okay, where do you want to start with that? Like, because that can be a big one. So let's try to create some parameters to start and stop, because that could be another big conversation. I guess protection and defense, like that's a big thing, right? When you're walking out in society on the street, there's so many things that you have to protect yourself. So as you were saying, though, what is very important is your mind state. But protection, you see, for some reason, right, this is where there's a lot of people who push Buddhists around this way, right? So, for example, it's like the little kid who goes around pinching someone all the time. He pinches you, he pinches you, he pinches you. And then eventually you get, after a while, if you're trying to be good, you try to avoid it, be quiet. But eventually you're like, will you stop pinching me? Or bang, punch, right? Then that person who pinches you goes, oh, you're a Buddhist. Why are you getting violent? Why and won't admit to what they're doing, that they've irked you and pushed you and pushed you and pushed you and pushed you. So the Buddhist will go, oh my God, I just reacted violently. Oh, what have I done? Right? But see, there are those situations. But ask yourself this. I asked this someone else the other day. If Buddha knew his mother or father or family or his monks or wherever, right? Even after he enlightened, before he enlightened, different story, right? But even then, right? If Buddha knew or saw his mother or father or his child or anyone he knew about to get attacked or hurt, do you think he would just sit under the tree and do nothing?
Probably not. But then again,
Right.
he doesn't create karma.
No, but what I'm saying is, yeah, well, that's true. But if he saw his mother and there's a group of bandits going for his mother, what would he do? Would he just sit there and say, no, I'm going to sit under the tree and I'm going to go in jhana?
Yeah, well, he saved Angulimala's mother, so that's sort of a precedent.
Right. And he also went to, when two kings were trying to go to war, he went to talk to them by foot, right? So it's not that there's a misrepresentation here. You are allowed to defend yourself. You're allowed to protect your freedom and protect your loved ones and protect your community. You're allowed to do that.
I'm allowed to strike out in self-defense. That's right there.
Yeah, you can. Well, the term is you're allowed to strike out if your freedom is getting restricted. So if you've got a group of people who are restricting you from walking from here to there, and they're blocking you, you're allowed to fight for your freedom out of that. And there's also a thing, if someone tries to touch you sexually, you're allowed to give them a thump in the head, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're allowed to bang.
Kick them across the room.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, what we don't do, the difference between, okay, so if I'm walking down the street and I'm with my mother, or I'm with my child, or I'm with my father, anyone, okay, just person B, and someone tries to accost them. See, in my mind, I've got nothing against that person. I've got no hate towards that person. I'm protecting my mother. I don't even know this person. There's nothing there. But I'll do what I can to protect my mother and myself. That's my duty. I'm not going to sit there and say, I'm Buddhist, Namo Buddhaya. Mum, sorry, you're on your own. Just he's going to kick you a few times and break your teeth, but that's all right. I'll take you to the hospital. Namo Buddhaya. I sit there and just watch my mum get totally obliterated. Are you kidding me? No, I would never do that. Not even as a monk. I would throw myself in there and protect her. That's normal. So there's this conception that Buddhists shouldn't be aggressive and shouldn't be violent. No, we shouldn't. But don't take away my right to defend myself, and do not take away, and I still have a right to defend my family, to protect my family and friends and community. I still have a right to.
Not just the right, the duty.
Well, the right in terms of the law and duty in terms of Buddhism, right? Because protection has nothing to do with violence. Now, what's the difference between violence?
Reason monks don't have families is then you're less likely to have to do that sort of thing.
Well, I do. I've got three children, so there's a lot of monks that have been married. So many. Like I met a monk who had 4 wives and 8 kids. There's a lot of retired family monks in the Sangha here in Thailand, right? A lot of monks ordaining at 70 and 80 years of age too, like grandfathers, they've just had enough. That's it. But what you've got to understand, there was this doctor monk. This is something for the lay people. There was this doctor monk that I met, this famous doctor, right? And I'm not going to say who he is or dox his, say much about it. Keep it private. But anyway, he worked hard all his life. He had his family set. And then when he was in his 70s, he ordained. And he says, I've been working for this my whole darn life to get to this point where, when I was younger, I wasn't really thinking about being a monk, but I got into the family and kids, and I already started studying at university. But then, the desire to be a monk and want to give away later, what was very strong in me, but I had all these responsibilities, right? So what he did, the way he did it, was he worked towards it, like I was saying to other lay people. He said, I've finally done what I've always wanted to do with my life. I've gotten all my responsibilities out of the way. You know what I mean? So there's nothing sinful or wrong about doing, like that was answering the question from before. I've just got on that track. But coming back to protection and violence, right? Now, violence is where very big difference. It's kind of like you pin down something and you just want to hurt them because of who they are.
Yeah, you're motivated by dosa.
Yeah, and you're just kind of like, I hate that guy's face, I just want to punch it. Or, or you want to rip someone off because they're talking loud or they're being obnoxious. Protection is like you lock your door at night. That's protection. When you lock your door at night, are you thinking about hurting anybody? You're not. Okay? So protection, there's a big fat line and there's a fine line between protection and violence, because the fine and big line comes from locking your door at night to if someone was to place hands or try to attack your village or city or suburb or your friends, right? Because that you have to go in a different frame. But the way to protect the person and protect yourself is you try to protect yourself with intelligence, right? And if you're developing the do no harm principle every day, you'll find intelligent ways, skillful ways, and also not to hurt the other person as well, if you can. Because your intention is not to hurt the person, the intention is to protect yourself. Very different. You're not going out of your way to hurt anybody. That's violence when you're going out of your way to hurt someone because and they're not doing anything to you, right? So as Buddhists, there's this connotation that, it's kind of the Christian thing, turn the other cheek. No, we don't do that in Buddhism. We don't turn the other cheek. If someone slaps me in the face, I'm going to make sure they don't slap me again. I'm sorry. I'll just, like if someone comes up to me, even as a monk, and I've been challenged, I push back. If someone pushes me, I'll push them back. I'm allowed to. But when I push them back, it's because I was pushed. I don't go and push someone, right? So it's difference, right? There's a difference. And sometimes it's better to act straight away because let me finish on this. It's like it's like a bully. Now in the schoolyard, right? If you've ever been bullied or if you've ever been the bully, I've been both. I've been bullied and I was a bully for a while, right? But if you let a bully get away with a little bit and you don't nip it in the bud straight away, it's going to get really bad for you real quick, because that bully will try to always gain more ground on you, more mental control. It's like a pimp when he meets an innocent woman or an innocent child, a boy child, because there's boy prostitutes in the world, right? And girl prostitutes and women prostitutes and men prostitutes. There's all kinds of prostitutes in the world, so usually they're run by a pimp, right? Or someone who, so what they do is they groom the person slowly. And then at some point they beat the living crap out of that person to establish control, okay? So this is mind control. So bullies, right? If a bully starts at you and you let him get away with it straight away, and then you let him get away with it again, they're just going to keep coming. So at some point, like I let it go, and then at some point I had to just punch the bully in the face. At that point, he left me alone. But I could have stopped that, I'm talking as a kid, I could have stopped that way before, right? So there is this thing in society where you got people who are motivated by hatred, greed, delusion, superiority complex, inferiority complex, who are just downright violent and want to hurt you, okay, or hurt others. You got it. We have to be real about this. How do we approach it in Buddhism? Well, you try to be very intelligent and skillful, and you try to avoid violent situations if possible, but there's nothing wrong with protecting yourself, okay? Now, I am not saying kill. No, I don't condone any killing. I don't condone any violence. I don't condone it. But sometimes when you protect yourself, it happens unintentionally. You understand? You understand the difference? And just because you're Buddhist it doesn't really mean you don't protect yourself. Oh, you're Buddhist. Why are you protecting yourself? Why are you pushing back? If you're Buddhist, you shouldn't do that. That's a real like big tagline that a lot of these Marxist lefties use, and a lot of Muslims too. If you're Buddhist, why are you pushing back? Why are you defending yourself? Well, it's my duty to defend. I'm being compassionate with myself. I'm playing goodwill to myself. I don't want to be hurt, and I don't want you to hurt me. And it's not good for you to hurt me. It's bad for you to hurt me. So I'm protecting us both. So how about that? Right? So this is something that as Buddhists, as lay people, I try to talk to a lot of people. It's not turn the other cheek, okay? Nip it in the bud early if you're bullied, but also practice do no harm principle with discipline, with staunchness. Eventually, your intelligence will mix with the actual practice. Eventually, and then you'll know how to get out of situations. I'll finish on this. Buddhism is not the path of the weak. It's not the path to become weak. Buddhism is to become powerful and strong, but strong not in a weapons connotation or punching strong. Strong as in wisdom, right? Ability to protect yourself and others and everything around. The Buddha was the biggest protector of them all, right? Big protector, protect many people. And the Buddha also said, monks live with a protector, someone who's crossed the shore, live with that person. That person can protect you. So Buddhism is big on protection. So anyway, I'll finish on this. I think I needed to say that because right now, society in Australia, it's getting pretty gnarly out there, and so I'm just reaffirming to any Buddhist watching, you're allowed to protect yourself.
Yeah, I would like. I mean, what you've been saying reminds me of a famous story. I've seen it more than once in various books. It's this famous story about this Aikido master. He's an American black belt in Aikido, and Aikido is like the most non-violent martial art where you're just trying to, like incapacitate the person, use their own strength to just kind of deflect, So anyway, there's this American Aikido master riding a train in Japan, and this drunken workman gets on board the train, and he's just in a foul mood, and he just starts lashing out at everyone around him. He's just picking fights and scaring the women and just making a big ugly scene. And so this Aikido master thinks, well, this calls for some Aikido. He's going to incapacitate the ruffian, And so he's getting up to challenge this Japanese workman who's being this drunken bully, And right when he stands up, this little old man who's sitting there just calls out to the drunken guy, "Hey, what you been drinking?" And then, the drunk guy says, "Sake." And then the little old man says, "Oh, I love sake. My wife and I sit out in our garden at night and drink a little cup of sake and watch the sun go down. It's very nice." And within just a few minutes, he's sitting there on the seat with the drunken guy, like lying across his lap, and the little old man is like stroking his hair, and the workman is saying, he got fired from his job today, and he has to go home and tell his family, and he's so ashamed, And the little old man is just saying, it's all going to be fine, it's all going to be okay.
Right.
And then the American Aikido master, he realizes that the little old man was the real master. He completely, he defeated the violence just with metta. Although, I mean, what you've been saying is true. Also, not everybody can do that. So you have to do what you can.
But that's a very, that tops what I'm saying. That's exactly where I'm going to. Yeah, and you're right. Not everybody can do that, but develop your intelligence, develop your skillfulness, just keep becoming more skillful so you can get to the point where you can do that, right? Because if you train in a violent, like that Aikido master stood up because he's training violently, he's training in all that, he's not training himself in metta. That's the difference. When Buddha stopped that elephant, that drunken elephant, right? That story, the drunken elephant charges the Buddha, and the Buddha just emits metta, and the elephant just stops in its tracks. Well, that's what we're trying to do. That's the culmination of the practice. That's what I'm talking about. It's kind of like, that's how you protect yourself, but that's the Buddha, right? That's the Buddha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to defeat evil, I mean, you can't defeat evil with more evil. You know, it's like hatred just breeds more hatred. You know, violence breeds more violence. So if you're going to stop evil, you have to do it with something that's better than evil.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so we're you know, just to backtrack a little bit. When I'm talking about protection, I've never ever said strike the person. Okay. Right? Sometimes that might be, sometimes that might have to happen, but understand this: if I push someone, I'm not really hurting them. You know, like there's different grades. You know, like I'll finish on this and then we'll call it a day, right? Because it's late and where you are. And I think we've said quite enough, but it's like when a layperson, one layperson got very intimidating with me once. Put his hand in my face, he's doing this, and he's very big and raising his voice, right? And I thought, okay, this is not going to end well, right? So what I did, instead of getting violent, I raised my voice like a high octave, right? I raised it quite loud, and that just freaked that person out completely and got him to back off, right? So after that, you know, that person left me alone, right? So that's what I'm talking about, that kind of thing. Sometimes, now, of course, now I think about it, I probably could have done it better, right? But at that time, you know, raising the voice and all that, I didn't hurt him physically at all, you know, maybe mentally a little bit, but I protected myself, but I protected him from hurting a monk and committing worse karma for himself, you see, which he didn't understand. Like, a lot of Westerners don't get it. Like, a lot of Westerners don't understand when you know, to be careful with monks. They think that we're saying that, you know, as a a way to kind of get some authority points, to get some kind of recognition. They don't get it. But it's not only just monks, it's anyone who's living a righteous life. See, anyone who lives a righteous life, be careful of that person. That could be a Christian minister, someone who practices Islam, someone who's Jewish, someone who's a Hindu, anyone, an atheist even, someone who has got strong morals and lives a very righteous life. Be careful of that person. Don't mess with them. You're going to cause it. It's just going to come back. Anyway, I think I'm done.
Okay.